Hello, my people, and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the podcast where I chat to fintech leaders about their secrets to success. I'm Dexter Cousins, your host and the founder of Tier 1 People, the executive search and recruitment firm that's dedicated to helping fintech companies hire exceptional people. Today's guest is Joni Pirovich of Crystal AOS, a crypto compliance tool powered by AI. She's joining us on our special series where we're highlighting some of the Aussie founders and innovators at the intersection of TradFi and digital assets. Joni, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dexter. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. It's been really cool to watch how you've evolved from the sidelines over this last few years. And I'm a big admirer of the work that you've done and the sacrifices that you've made, particularly in the digital asset space, to move that space along. And I think you're probably one of the biggest contributors to the Australian government R&D in this space, and you haven't been paid a dime. So thank you very much for coming on. And I'm hoping that you can kind of share with us a little bit more about you now going into the world of ventures and hopefully getting some payback for all the hard work that you've done.
Well, it's a rocky road doing it from Australia. Some people have described it as hard mode, and I can attest to that. But I think I'm a crypto lifer, and when I say crypto, I mean all of this good programmable innovation that we've hardly unlocked yet. So that crypto word is a loaded word of good things for me. Hopefully, with the software that I'm building, we can help unlock a lot more of that.
Awesome. So maybe as if you could tell us a little bit about your background before we talk about the solution that you're working on.
Happy to. So I've been a crypto lawyer for about a decade now and have seen many bears and bulls and holding on for dear life at times. It's been fun. And about 5 years ago, I started my own crypto specialist law firm called Bedazzle. And that stands for Blockchain and Digital Assets Services Plus Law. We do the legal services plus the strategic consulting internationally. Because crypto and blockchain is a global technology, if you're working in this space, you're really global from day one. But from the regulatory perspective, you need to start putting some guardrails and some barriers to throttle the potential of the technology to stay within the bounds of the regulatory environment. So I've, in my law firm, obviously international tax was my anchor. I was trained at PwC, but having been a crypto lawyer for the last decade, where we had the ICO boom, we've had DeFi summer, we've had NFT summer. It started as a tax anchor, but then I had the initiation of fire each time to become a financial services and regulatory lawyer. And then NFTs introduced a lot of the IP considerations. And throughout that, we had a lot of litigation, labor issues, employment issues, which we can get into if you like, but just worked with subject matter experts in the different legal domains around the world. So have acted for every different type of crypto business, whether that be exchanges or custodians, development companies for DeFi protocols, foundations, you name it, I've acted for them. And I've probably seen from a holistic view the spectrum of legal and tax issues that they're grappling with.
We finally seem to be making some progress on the regulatory front, which is brilliant. My concern from a kind of you being the specialist in human capital, and I'm getting smashed at the minute with head of compliance roles that are really hard to find the people. And when you reach out to the people, they want to be paid 2 to 3 times more than what the role's actually valued to the business. So I kind of see a huge challenge ahead in being able to administer what the government's proposing purely from a lack of skills, knowledge, and expertise, which I guess is the segue for you to talk about the solution that you're working on, because I think it's going to be critical that we have access to tools like the one that you're building in order to overcome these challenges that I'm kind of predicting are right there, just around the corner.
exactly. It's the hiring at the senior levels, who has that perfect blend of traditional finance compliance experience as well as exposure to
Yeah,
crypto compliance to step into these roles. But at the same time, in developing AI tools, I can see the other side of the debate, which is how do we train the juniors and
yeah,
continue to have humans involved in the loop in
yeah,
high value adding ways. So there's a top down and there's a bottom up that we're trying to solve for at the same time. And we think that having a system, the Crystal agentic operating system at the ready is what is going to solve for those hierarchies, I
yeah,
suppose. And really, it's giving people the ability to interact with AI in their most productive way. And my theory and my thesis is humans don't do their best just chatting in to these GPTs. They're not going there. They don't want ChatGPT to give them the answer. They want to build the systems that they can almost set and forget so
yeah,
that they know the role that they're going to play. And that's part of a system. You rise to the standard of your systems rather than fall to the level of each thing that you can put in a chat.
yeah, yeah.
So that's essentially what we're building from top down to bottom up.
So tell me a little bit about kind of the process that you've been going through, and how you've gone from being a lawyer to now being a tech founder.
That's a journey of itself
Yeah,
and lots of hard lessons learned because as a lawyer, you are trained, you are drilled to look for risk and
yeah,
not be friends with it, and actually through being the founder of my crypto specialist law firm, I took on sometimes the role of in-house counsel where you're working alongside the business and there are simply not enough resources to dispel and
yeah,
address every risk that there is. So you need to prioritize and you need to triage. And that moderated the strict discipline that there is when you go through law school to say, identify all of the legal risks
mm,
and provide the legal advice. Managing legal and compliance risks doesn't just stop with the piece of paper giving you the advice on what they are.
yeah,
There is the whole operational model of how you manage them and dynamically manage them as the circumstances and the
yeah,
settings continue to change. So, the practice of law is very much different to applying the theory of law.
yeah,
And that I developed through Bedazzle, really, and also through the training at Peter. But now that whole operational model of applying law of right fit, right size at right time, that is where AI can help us increase our throughput of the identification of issues
mm,
and the material remediation or suggested remediation of issues. And then the human value is judgment. Do I want to bring to bear based on my experience or my other knowledge?
yeah,
And so the humans should be allowed to thrive in those
yeah.
circumstances with the tools that allow them to thrive.
One of what you've just explained there is probably the biggest challenge that I have when it comes to hiring and identifying the right people. And I think the
Mm,
reason for that is that your compliance for a long time, was very much seen as a kind of not a luxury, but just a necessity. And you kind of focused on people who would tick and bash and, kind of compliance says no. And that's been the relationship of, kind of compliance with the rest of the business for a long time. I think
mm,
over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen very much, kind of this demand for, and I seen exactly the same thing with accountants back in 2008, where you go from putting them in the back and just, do the spreadsheet to, oh, we want you to be commercial. And so, okay, but you've kind of just, bred this entire, generation of a profession where you basically told them to shut up and get in the back and just kind of, now you want them to be, these kind of commercial, super sharp, strategic, helping the business grow and all of these things. But, they're not natural things that come to a lawyer or a compliance or a risk professional, as you've
mm,
pointed out, right? Like, in the title, everything that you're looking at is risk. When you're in an environment that's the most risky that you're ever going to be in, in terms of a startup or a kind of scale up business. How have you developed those skills, and what are your kind of observations around how a tool like the one that you're building then frees up people to be able to build those, you kind of, I hate the term soft skills, but the more human element of what's required in the role?
Well, I think the tools we've had to date haven't helped us be better humans or
Yeah.
better at productivity. And
Yeah.
I'll actually use a non-compliance based example because it's been a really cool wow moment for me. When I first started using Opus Clip. So this is an
Yeah.
AI powered video.
I know it. Yeah.
You know it well. No, I mean, if it's awesome. And actually, the wow moment for me using Opus Clip was so for those that are not familiar, you can record a video, might be 90 seconds or it might be an hour, and you upload it into Opus Clip. It then deconstructs that whole video into sound bites. It might be 10-second sound bites or 20 seconds. So you might have a spray of 10 sound bites from your 2-minute video. And that is sort of the first level of usefulness. Is it makes it easier for you to share those snips on social media. But it goes one step further and it ranks the virality of each of those sound bites. So you know exactly this is going to have 98% virality, but this other clip is only going to be 10%. So that within seconds helps you identify how to be a better human at the recording stage, the upstream stage. And so yes, once you've recorded it, you'll pick the 97, the 98% viral one. But actually, if you go in and look at the 10% one, you can immediately learn how to be better at recording. And that's the same methodology that I'm using with Crystal to say, you don't want to chat. Yes, you can go and do prompt engineering and improve your, prompt to get to context engineering and put more of the context in the prompt. But you're not there for just the answer. You're there to improve the upstream.
Yeah. 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 It's funny you mention that because I'm using Claude in a very similar way. Yes, it can help me do things quicker, but it's more from a research perspective and me kind of getting out. You'll know this, right? You kind of, it's almost like you got multiple personality disorder when you're a founder or leading a small business because you got so many different hats to wear, and getting that out of your head, something I've found really difficult, over the last 9-10 years that I've been a business owner, and still have, my black book and, jot things down. And what I've found, my workflow has changed, a lot since I've used Claude, where rather than write that stuff down, I'll put it into Claude and kind of have it there and just go back and kind of do different iterations, right? Whether it's a thing I'm thinking about doing with a business or whatever it might be, to get that feedback. Some of it's nonsense, but some of it's actually,
Improve you.
really, improvement. Yeah. And so I think this is, what you've said about the kind of how we use the tool. It's not, it's not to give the answers. It's actually to, kind of move people towards more of a critical thinking kind of mindset, right?
Yeah, but also in my own experience of using more AI in my day-to-day, and Crystal Chat was one of the first applications of the AOS. I used that in Bedazzle to increase the throughput, so could do more work in less time.
Yeah.
And, focus on myself as the value-adding piece of the puzzle. But the mental fatigue that comes with the increased throughput is no joke.
Yeah.
So as part of this transition that I think we need to go through, I have been playing with this a third model where actually my ideal day will eventually be a third of reading my new subject matter content, which I need to be an expert in, which is actually both crypto regulatory subject matter as well as AI developments. A third of actually approving and reviewing and doing my human value sign-offs of the work that is paying the bills. And then the other third is the connection with humans. So comparing the experience or stakeholder engagement, you can't continue to function with your device optimally if you lack human connection.
Yeah.
That's at least my three
Yeah.
pillars of what I think our days need to involve going forward.
Yeah. Well, I've got to kind of put my hand up and confess. I think it was about a year ago, actually. I was invited to judge awards at the Decker Awards, the Blockies, and you were actually one of the finalists that I was judging. And when I read your nomination and your application, that was the moment for me where I went all in on AI. Because I got to see the impact that one person was having on an industry and something that was so complex, that took up so much brain power, where there were concepts and things that didn't even exist. And one person was able to do all of this. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, like, I can't believe one person's having this impact. And I'm assessing your application against others, that international law firms and kind of with all these resources. And I'm like, wow, like this one person is having a bigger impact than, like all these businesses with all these resources. So I think for me, that was a kind of a, light bulb moment to go, wow, this isn't just kind of hype and nonsense, right? Like if you
No,
figure out
yeah, I'm
how to
actually
use these
putting it to work.
tools, yeah. So I want to kind of shift the conversation a little bit more onto, where we're at as an industry. I kind of joked before about the, and it wasn't really a joke, about the amount of R&D, and the bill that you could potentially send the Australian government. But I wanted to talk about where you feel we're at as an industry, and maybe some of the things that we've all got to be doing better to move this forward, because it does feel like we're at a point where, yes, they still have to be cautious, but if we don't move, we very much we're already being left behind. We're going to get left behind even further.
Well, like I said in the opening, being in Australia is in hard mode. Whenever I travel overseas, and there are a number of crypto and AI conferences that I've attended across the US, Asia Pac, and EU, UK, the way that I'm received and what I'm talking about, I mean, the rooms are just more filled. So the reach that you get for any one room that you're speaking in is tenfold. But also, when I was in Toronto and the UK mid-year talking about Crystal AOS and what's coming and what's being built, I had a lineup of people that couldn't wait to learn more and are on the wait list. Whereas in Australia, we don't have that same volume of events or reach. And typically the crypto events are not attended by traditional finance looking to get the edge. There's not that same level of inclusiveness. TradFi is still very separate to crypto. We are seeing some convergence, but it's slower than what I see overseas. So the only thing, or the strongest things keeping me in Australia, are non-business related. They're the healthcare, they're my family, they're the school system. Those are the sticky things that make it hard to leave Australia. But sort of everything else is what's welcoming me to go rest of world first, to give this software and this business a better chance of global reach.
Yeah, I've found the same thing, right? Human capital, talent. Go to Singapore, for example, and regulators want to chat to me, and I'm why? I'm like a talent guy, right? Like I'm not legal. I'm like, oh no, you're at the coalface, right? Like you know exactly what's going on. Whereas here in Australia, you kind of get battered away. Nobody's interested. And I think for me, the issue, Joni, is it seems to me in the rest of the world, competition is what keeps the incumbents honest. In Australia, it's regulation that keeps the incumbents up, and they're more scared of the regulators than they are of competition. And I think that kind of creates, the wrong incentive structure. And we see this all the time, right? Like all of the policy and the debates got nothing to do about the end user, right? They're all about, infrastructure. CDR is a good example where consumer data, right? And there's very little conversation until, down at We Money really started to push that agenda, all of the conversations have been around policy and regulation and all the other stuff and technology. And I think it's, such a, it's kind of lackadaisical, right? Like your kind of customer has to always be number one, right? But in Australia, it's kind of like the regulator's number one. And, as long as we're doing right by the regulator, we kind of don't have to worry about anything.
Which is the luxury of being an incumbent.
Yeah.
But for startups and scale-ups that have to be completely and immediately responsive to the user and what is best and easiest for the user, it's an extremely difficult environment to test and get to initial product market fit.
Yeah.
And it's highly expensive to even get to that point. So why would you do that in Australia?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And look, we saw that with the neobanks, right? Where they were given licenses and no chance of success. Because again, they required huge amounts of capital for the license. And, their wage bill itself would have been, $10, $20 million a year before you've even got a product out to a customer, right? Like, and you would need $20 million a year in capital just to pay the wages. And it's going to take you 5-6 years to get products in customers' hands. There's no innovation doesn't stand a chance, right? So it's what do you think we could be doing better around that then? And what do you think kind of government regulators need to change in order, other than asking us to do the same submission 10 times over? What do you think are some of the things that they can do to really kind of move things on and create more of an environment that is conducive to true innovation?
Well, probably a lot of things. My understanding is that there are always several initiatives going and underway, and it's sort of who you know to get on track and be part of the Australia UK fast track program, or the equivalent for US Australia. It's quite hard for first-time founders or even people in traditional finance to understand what track they need to go on that is the fast track for high growth startup ideas. So, and that again is a feature of the lack of, I think, inclusive events that have that information free flowing.
Yeah.
We don't have a good sort of supportive network in Australia, or it's relative to what I see in overseas markets, it's not as free flowing with that really useful information. You need to get into something to get that information.
So you take Singapore, for example, right? And I know, I was blown away when I went there in 2019 and saw what they were doing with fintech. I think kind of Steve's now kind of echoing exactly what I was saying in 2019 around digital assets. But I think the reason for that is that everything came from mass, and they got this really clear agenda that is inclusive, right? What blew me away in 2019 was how fintech was part of this broader picture of health, AI, agriculture, infrastructure, all of these things around, the kind of the North Star was the regions or the world's biggest smart city by 2025 or 2030 or whatever it was. And that was the thing that kind of, meshed everything together was, hey, none of these are going to be the thing that's going to get that goal. We got to bring them all together.
Exactly. And I think we've seen some Southeast Asian countries, coming back to sort of crypto policy, they've introduced holistic packages. So at the same time, they realize that there's an uplift needed for regulatory AML/CTF, the securities law AML/CTF side, as well as tax, as well as attraction of capital and the incentives around attracting and retaining labor. Like, those are holistic packages that are coming in to lift the environment to get the best startups operating or headquartering out of those jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And in Australia, like you would have seen, we've had regulatory movement. So the digital asset platforms and tokenized custody platforms bill, and we've got a proposed stablecoin legislation in the backdrop of also the AML/CTF reforms uplift. But we still don't have tax, labor, attraction of capital, and retention of good capital.
Yeah.
And you do need that full recipe list to to do it, to move the dial. So hopefully that stuff is coming. Maybe it's being staged, but I think Australia does have a big lift to do. And I'm glad that we've started, but it's not the end. There's
Yeah,
still a lot
yeah.
more to do.
One of the things that I've noticed, right, and it's kind of, this happened in fintech, it's the same in digital assets, is that coordination piece is two-way. And the thing, and I was talking to somebody on Thursday night actually about this, who, we're talking about how to get government on side. And for me, like Labour government, they're interested in school teachers, nurses, AMBOs, right? Like, unions. If a tech founder's coming up to them and saying, hey, we're going to create, a gazillion-dollar business and we're going to have like 50 employees and I'm going to get super rich. Where's the incentive, right? Going to go, yeah, we'll support that. And this is the kind of narrative, right? That kind of keeps coming up. There's very little about job creation. Tech Council has got desperate where they're talking about, rather than the tech industry, anybody that works in an IT job is, a part of the industry. And say, hang on a second, guys, like, you can't be claiming, you're employing 800,000 people when most of them are working for government and like big banks, right? Like, where if you're the tech industry, like the tech industry startups, scale ups, and kind of moving this next part. What do you think that the other side, right? Like our side, can be doing better to kind of coordinate the messaging and getting it clear? Because for me, Joni, the kind of frustration I have is understand how industry bodies work. They're membership organizations that, who's paying the memberships gets the voice, right? And so they should, that's their customers, but that isn't necessarily the voice that is required in order to, the message that we should be giving to government and regulators. What do you think we could be doing better on that side?
A lot, again, and with Australia's ability to coordinate large communities and large membership bases to deliver, a top message or the top 3 asks, we are still unproven in that respect.
Yeah.
And we need to get a lot better at our coordination of policy effort to achieve effective outcomes. But just to riff off the other point that you raised, that it might not be something that the government wants to incentivize, for the founder or the founding team to get rich quickly.
Yeah.
And it's only sort of a 50 employee or 50 head count in Australia. I would say that if you fast forward that, those 10 or those 20 or those 50 people that get rich anecdotally will contribute back into the ecosystem that allowed them to get rich. And so you have this exponential sequence that triggers as soon as once you've kept the first one, then, the 3 to 5 years later, if they've had wealth, they can reinvest that back into the next wave. And again, you exponentially grow the culture and the ecosystem of productivity growth.
Yeah.
So I would say Australian government and both sides suffer from the short-sightedness of the 3-year term.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we need really just more strategic long-term policy if we are going to get productivity growth from the tech sector.
Yeah. We're coming to a wrap up. In terms of where people can find out more about Crystal, where's the best way for people to find out?
Well, if you're a crypto business, you need to have emailed me or reached out on Twitter and LinkedIn to get on the waitlist. You will not get into special access week unless you're on the waitlist. So my email is joni@crystalaos.com, and LinkedIn, just Joni Pirovich, same for Twitter. We can share the details on the podcast later.
There might be some TradFi people listening to this who, might all of a sudden be being thrust into that world through things like acquisition. If there's interest there, like what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, email is best. Like, I am still the person that I read every email. I think there's still a valuable human thing to do to understand your inbound. So please do that, or find me at the next crypto event in Australia or internationally, and we can have a chat and figure out how it applies to their circumstances and where the TradFi organization is at in their crypto and blockchain transition journey.
Awesome. Joni, it's been fantastic to have you on. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and congrats on Crystal as well. And I'll be cheering from the sidelines for you.
Thanks so much, Dexter. It's been a pleasure.